Hey guys, it's Roderick, and I'm here for the review of The Handmaid's Tale, Season 5, Episode 9, Allegiance. I apologize for the late review, but life, right? So, anyway, before we get into review, I want to discuss that map I've dropped down in the comments last week. Because of all the states that I would be resistant to Gilead, Texas? Really? Which kind of makes sense because, Texas always thinks that they want to do something special. But then you would think Texas would be the first state to be signing up for handmaids or whatever. So I kind of found that was very interesting. Also, it kind of makes sense now when you look at the map and see that so much of the United States has been taken over by Gilead. Obviously some of the larger cities will still have resistance, which kind of makes sense because they're more densely populated. You have a more diverse thinking about life or whatever. But I was very surprised to see that so much of California, for example, had been taken over or whatever. So anyway, if you didn't look at it, look at last week's review, and there's a link that you'll see how much of the United States that Gilead took over. So that way you kind of get like a conceptual outlook of kind of what everything looks like. Okay, let's get to this review because I have to say this was my favorite episode. This episode gave me everything I needed. It gave me minimum Luke, gave me no more Rita, gave me messy, and we see Serena getting what she deserves, and we'll just get into all that. But this was my favorite episode. All the other episodes were great, but this really had me gagging scene for scene for scene because it was so good. Because I just like kind of, drama with a little mess. And Bradley Whitford did such a great job directing this episode. So kudos to him. So let's just get into it. Okay. So June, Tuello, and Luke are going into this hangar because now June has kind of latched her way into this kind of operation mission because basically they're rescuing Hannah so she doesn't defect over to Gilead. Let's be clear, that's what the stakes are, right? So she's in the hangar and they're briefing her. And, June is nervous and I'm nervous too because we're just like, oh Lord, what's going to happen, right? I thought, sure, anyway, we'll get to that. So she's in the hangar and she meets the commander and she's really trying to put the commander through it. He's like, no, I'm going to make sure, whatever. And she kind of bullies herself into the extraction, right? Because she's like, oh, we should be there, whatever. Tuello's like, fine. I'm like, of course you knew June was going to bully her way through because, when she meets someone, he's like, oh, you're Miss Osborne. So, she's putting her name to use, So I was like, fine, June, bully yourself into the extraction. Then we meet the commander who's in charge of the mission. And he has a daughter named Emma. And I was like, yay, whatever. So everything seems to be good. June's getting ready for the extraction. So that's our teaser. Then we get into Act 1. Ha! So we get into Act 1 and Serena's getting pictures taken in her teal. So notice how the show kind of switches between Serena and her different outfits. I think to kind of give you the connotation of where she is kind of maybe mentally in her mind, right? So when Serena's in her teal, she's all in her high and glory. When Serena's in her street clothes, she's trying to get a sense of normalcy. And when Serena's in that pale yellow, she's like this close to being a handmaid, right? So that kind of those colors and the costuming really kind of acts as a kind of indicator for where Serena is, maybe even mentally, or where she really may be actually in relation to where she may think's in her head. So she's getting pictures taken, and it's for the PR for the center, because remember, Serena had the idea of making a fertility clinic, right? So she's, getting her pictures taken with Noah, bop, 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 boom. And then here comes Mrs. Wheeler, and she was like, oh, you know what? This was my idea. I think Noah and I should go because it'll be a great center for attraction. And Mrs. Wheeler just shoots that shit down. She was like, no, absolutely not. You'll stay here. And then she's like, you're a guest. So then Serena's kind of like, And she's like, but she goes, you're our guest and you're under supervision. And my husband doesn't answer to those commanders, which makes me question okay, he has to answer to somebody, right? And so if Lawrence is the one running the show and you got Lawrence and Nick and all the other ones, who is this little second outfit answering to? And if he doesn't answer to Lawrence, who is he? Is this just Gilead too? Like, what's the chain of command here? I just never knew that you could just be a willy-nilly commander or whatever he was and not have to answer to somebody in Gilead, right? Because that's one of the things of Gilead is all about making sure you know where you are in the pecking order, right? So I was just like, okay, so then Mrs. Wheeler's like, you need to start pumping. And Serena's like, bitch, the fuck? And she's like, you know what? I think, it's better for him to do the breast or whatever. And she's like, Mrs. Wheeler's like, well, that's what we were doing when you were locked up. And Serena's like, okay, bitch, like, you can't keep throwing this whole me being locked up shit in my face or whatever. And then Serena, like, steps right up to Mrs. Wheeler's about to be like, you know what, bitch? And then finally Serena's like, okay, I'll pump. And I was thinking to myself, girl, Serena is going to get you. I was like, this is where you put that snake with that long memory to fucking good use, right? Because Mrs. Wheeler is really, and which is so great because A, Serena's getting a taste of her own medicine. And also the Wheelers really don't know who they're dealing with Serena, right? Because it's one of those things like in life where, yeah, you have the upper hand right now and, whatever. But, I mean, Serena, of all the people, isn't the one to be trying to fuck around with this whole baby situation, right? So I was just like, oh, girl, you're going to get it and you're going to get it good. So I was just like, I am all here for it. So then we get to Lawrence and Aunt Lydia and they're like waiting for someone to arrive. And Commander Lawrence is like, oh, she's late. And I was like, who? I'm thinking it's like, Lord, don't let it be, I was like, is it Esther? Is it Janine? Child, it's Naomi. They're like, Naomi shows up and then she's like, well, thank you. It kind of explains the situation. And Commander Lawrence is kind of fumbling through his words because he recognizes it's a very awkward situation to have. And, Aunt Lydia was like, oh, you're doing the right thing. Oh, this is great. He's like, basically, Aunt Lydia takes over the delivering of the bad news. It's like, Naomi, girl, you can't be a single person with a child in that house. Now, Naomi's dumbass is like, oh my God, this house is too big. You just move me to a condo. He's like, bitch, we ain't your fucking real estate agent. We talk about the whole setup here. You can't be by yourself. So here's a quid pro quo. You and your baby move up in here. You get a husband and some covering, and I get to look like I'm really about this Gilead wifely duty shit like that. And she was like, is this a marriage proposal? I was like, bitch, were you expecting like roses and like blue, like boob? Like, what you think this is? And so then he's like Commander Lawrence gets in his feelings. He steps away. And then Naomi's like, he had my husband killed right in front of me. And then Commander Lawrence is like feeling kind of bad about it. And Aunt Lydia, once again, I'm all for the bad characters using their badness to other bad people. I'm there for it all the time. She's like, girl, he got over it, and I think you should too. And so then I was like, because like, Naomi, what did you think it was going to be? Because if you recall from 2 seasons ago, or either 1 season ago, when Naomi went and had the conversation with Serena when she was pregnant about, it had to be last season then, when Naomi had that conversation with Serena, she was low-key telling Serena that she was going to be a handmaid if she came back to Gilead and she wasn't with Fred. So really one of the things about this episode is that karma is coming fast and quick to all the people who sowed it. Not completely and fully. We're seeing some sprouts. I mean, the fruit hasn't come yet, but I'm seeing some karma stalks and I'm all the way here for it. So Naomi is kind of like, okay. And I was like, girl, I don't know what you thought you were going to do. Like, whatever. So anyway, Serena, we come back to Serena. She's at the Wheeler's house and she's putting her breast milk in the fridge. And immediately I was like, notice again, she ain't in teal. She's in she's not in full handmade color, but that little pale yellow or whatever, that's like, when she's in her lowly stance, right? So I was like, okay, girl, what you gonna do? Because again, I'm not standing for Serena, but I'm just all for her really taking the Wheelers down a notch. But I don't know what world you live in. You can just take somebody's whole ass baby and that person's in their house. Oh, I guess Gilead. But you're not in Gilead, you're in Canada. So the Wheelers are just on some bullshit so they should really get their shit totally taken down. So here comes Serena, and she's trying to do her little sachet, and she sees Mr. Wheeler, and she's like, oh, can I have a moment? And then she really kind of goes in with Gilead could have used you, you would have been great. And I was like, okay, girl, like, you should have lost to try to take this woman's husband, okay? Like, not that I'm all about like side pieces and like undercutting marriage, but you know, eggs and omelets again, okay? Eggs and omelets. So I was like, okay, Serena, Mr. Wheeler is not having it. He was like, okay, you butter me up. What do you want? I was like, ooh, girl, you're going to have to do something. Like, I thought she was going to, like, drop to her knees. Like, I'm not saying, like, a trip to the center is worth a blowjob, but, like, desperate times, desperate measures type of shit, right? So she was like, well, you know, this fertility clinic thing was my idea. You know, I really think I should be there. Plus, you know, it gives hope to all these Canadians who are delusional about Gilead anyway. Bop, bop, the boo. And she was like, Mr. Wheeler was like, okay, I'll put it under consideration. I was like, damn, girl. I was like, you're going to have to step your pussy game up. Like, you should have had you a different type of outfit. Like, you only get one shot to make a good hoe-ass impression, and that was not it, looking all dowdy and whatever. Like, Serena done looked a lot better for more better causes. So I don't know what she was thinking about that, but I was like, girl, you should have stepped your pussy game up because, I mean, while you into asking business, you could have been asking for some more shit, but, you know, whatever. So that's when we get down to that. And he was like, whatever. So now, Tuella and June and Luke are at the command center, right? So now we're looking at kind of like one of those big, typical kind of intelligence apparatus screens where you see like the planes and the troops, whatever, going in and their target, right? And we get this really great intercut. Intercut is when we kind of have two scenes and they're going back and forth to each other, right? It's like simultaneously, almost in real time. Right? So we get an intercut between June looking at the screen, and then we get Hannah at the wives' school, right? So the intercut was like really nicely done because June's looking, you know, and praying, and then Hannah goes to her room and she's praying, and then she's looking at her book with a whole bunch of pictures on it, just to remind you that clearly Hannah, because if you think about it, like Hannah can read and write, as we'll see. But like, you know, women aren't allowed to read and write. So if you're born in Gilead as a woman, you will never learn how to read, right? I don't know about writing. I don't know if they even let them write. I can't remember if Serena ever wrote, but you never see them write. And, you know, they can't read. They all use pictures or whatever. Because if you recall, when Serena arrived in Canada and they gave her all the information, it was all pictures, right? That's when she was with Fred. So women aren't allowed to read. So we see her looking through her little book, and you see like the Tower of Babel and, you know, different various Bible stories. And then there's a nice little picture, you know, she has drawn that she drew. I think we see her and she looks around and she picks up a pencil and she writes Hannah. And I was like, that's right, girl. You know your name. Because very much a roots, my name is Kunta Kinte. Know your name is, you know your name is Toby. Know my name is Kunta Kinte. Know my name is Toby. Like that was as given. It was like, I still remember my name, which actually kind of gave me hope that maybe this Hannah-June reunion won't be a shit show because she really does, you know, she really does remember her family and loves her family, and she just may have been shaken, being dragged out of bed and put in cages because of June's bullshit, and that maybe this reunion, when it does happen, will not be a horrible shit show. So, and also this is the first time that we're seeing any type of character development for Hannah. Like, so for 4 seasons, or really 5 seasons and some change now, you know, Hannah's been this symbol, right? It's a symbol of June's old life. It's a symbol of what June's striving for. And it is the main character objective for June, right? So now we get to kind of embody that or make that corporeal by seeing Hannah and what it's like for her to be at this wives' school. So I thought this was really great. Another reason why I really love this episode is that we're kind of flushing out this Hannah character, because we've never really spent any time with Hannah, what she's been going through. I mean, we see the trifling ass McKenzie's all the fucking time, but we don't ever get to see kind of where Hannah is in this kind of trajectory map. Like, does she want to go home? Does she love the McKenzies? Is she like her mama, silently plotting and planning? Like, we don't know any of these things. And I really thought that this scene, as short as it was, conveyed enough information about Hannah that we were really, really drawn in. Like, I was like, okay, now, like, I can really, like, I want more Hannah scenes, right? Even if she's just, to figure out just where her head is, okay? So then we go back to command center and they got the lock, right? So they're driving, so that we see the planes going in, we see the target, Hannah's praying, June's praying, I'm coming banana, child, the plane, we're here, they got the lock, which means that the enemy has locked onto their positions, right? And I was like, oh shit, the jig is up. And all of a sudden the screen goes no data for all the three planes. And then Tuello rushes June and Luke out. And then I was like, okay, here we go. So then June and Luke are in the hallway, and Tuello comes in with the most classic line, our intel was wrong, and the planes are gone. And so I was like, of course, right? Because I think, my theory is, I think Nick was the one who sent the video, and I think Nick was the one who made sure those anti-aircraft systems were outside the school. Those pictures were not sent to entice June to get her daughter back. Those sisters were sent to entice June to join New Bethlehem, right? So once again, the world's shittiest spy had no type of intelligence sifting, no type of vetting of this intelligence. Some common person hands you a videotape, and then you're gonna launch an entire military attack based upon a videotape that somebody else gave you, right? Once again, the world's shittiest spy. Like, I cannot believe the CIA is that down after the rise of Gilead that this is the intelligence apparatus that we have. I fail to believe that literally Mark Tuello is leading the way of the American intelligence community, because I know Snoopy with a blindfold on could have done a far fucking better job than Mark Tuello has done in his entire intelligence apparatus. I was just like, really? I just can't. So anyway, June's at home. She's on the back porch. So the phone rings. So I'm thinking, oh my God, it's Nick about to confess because he snitched. Child, it's Lawrence talking about, I guess you fucked around and found out. And I was like, So then he's like, that was not for you. You need to call. You can still come to New Bethlehem. And guess what? Nick is there. And then June's like, what? You think you could just dangle Nick in front of me and I'll do whatever? Yeah, bitch. Like, that's pretty much your jig anyway. Dingle, dingle, jingle, 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 Nick. Dance, 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 June. Anyway, girl, but I like the fact you put up a fight and didn't want to have your slip show. But we all know that when you say Nick, you go where, okay? So anyway, so I was just like, whatever. So Lawrence is like, you should take the deal. And she's like, and if you take the deal, you have to get on international television and say that there was a needless act of aggression by America. I was like, hold the fuck on, right? So this is a plot hole or a plot device that the writers have not buttoned up yet, and I'm gonna kind of expose it because this really needs to be fixed, okay? Now follow my logic here, okay? For the people in the back, follow me. If June can get on international television and condemn the United States for a needless act of aggression against Gilead and announce that she is then moving to New Bethlehem as a show of support for the ways of Gilead, can she also not get on international television and condemn Gilead for taking her daughter and create international pressure because her daughter has been held hostage in Gilead, and I am this motherfucking Jude Osborne, and I flew a whole bunch of kids back out here, right? So tell me again how one is possible and the other is not. For anything in life, here's a life lesson and rule for those elementary logic people. If one thing is true, the inverse of it must also be true, right? So if June can do that, then June can do this. And I will continue to harp on this because I don't understand why this was not an option or why this has been foreclosed off. And we'll get later in the episode when we kind of broach this topic again and we don't get a sufficient answer. So I don't know whether this is going to be a big, what the next season is going to be, but this should have been buttoned up a little bit more to explain to me why, as soon as she got off the boat in season 3, she was not on Good Morning America, Gayle King, Oprah, Kelly Ripa, Wendy Williams was still on at that time. I just don't understand why that was not an option, right? And I just don't, I get it, you just got back, but girl, again, if Hannah was the objective, then that should have been what you should have been doing. But anyway, so then June goes on and then tells Lawrence, Gilead is evil, and more importantly, you're horrible because you know better, right? You know this is bad, and you're still going with it. And we kind of see the external, the internal struggle that's going on with Commander Lawrence, which Bradley Whitford really, really does portray really well during this entire episode, is that he's seeing there are costs, right? Like there's, like you're going to pay either one way or another, and the cost of making Gilead, and now you want to rise up to the ranks and be the HNIC, there's a cost to that, right? And he's seeing that it costs him a lot. It costs him Eleanor and whatever. So then he was like, I'm just doing the best I can. I promise Eleanor. So June's like, Eleanor hated you. I was like, girl, shut up. Like, how is this? I'm like, I mean, I know he ain't worth shit, but it ain't no reason to piss him off since he is the only thing connecting you as a possible way to get Hannah. But I take that back. Let's go back. So June says, I just want my daughter here and my daughter to be free, right? And then Lawrence is like, it's never going to happen, because just as much as June is a symbol to the resistance to Gilead, Hannah is a symbol to Gilead's future. And they're not going to let her up, A, just to spite June, and B, because she's very symbolic because Serena's stunt earlier in the season, which every time I think about it, I feel like June should just go over there and whoop Serena's ass, but Serena's getting hers anyway. So once again, God is not mocked. What you sow is what you reap. So anyway, that I think is what set June off to be like, you know what, Eleanor hated you. And I was like, ooh, girl, like, dead man's wife, that is not going to turn out well. And then I was like, she was so broken and so ashamed of you to be the husband, she would rather be dead. And now that is killing Lawrence. And you see the tears, and I was like, girl. And she then after that, she just takes a knife even more in the neck, was like, and I sat there and did nothing as she did. And I was like, girl, why don't you have to give that up, right? And he was like, I knew you had something to do with it. And I was like, girl, like, Lawrence ain't really shit. As amusing as his character is, he really is just as bad as the rest of them. But I don't know if this was the appropriate time to you to be like spilling all your tea and letting your slip show, because this is once again about June and her badass ideas and her not thinking ass plans, right? Like, that's the conversation you have when you have your daughter in hand, right? That's not the conversation after you done got at least half a dozen men killed in a military action that now like they're gonna be parentless with. Like, that's not the time, June, for you to be trying to like rub that in. I was like, girl, here we go. You just need to do whatever. So then, he was like, I watched her die. And then she hangs up the phone, and so she destroys this garden, right? Now, one of the things the show is really good about is kind of showing you time elapses, right? So if you remember, earlier in the season, it was colder. We're now in springtime. So we're talking about probably maybe 5 months, maybe 6 months have elapsed since the beginning of the season. Because remember, the garden, she was planting, she was putting things in. Now the garden has really bloomed and June is destroying it, right? So it's very much just kind of symbolic of, the garden was, I guess, her hope, right? So let's say, if one interpretation would be, the garden was the hope she had when this season first started, of her getting Hannah and things being good and, going through all the different seasons. And now June is just whacking at the garden. And then here comes Luke, to get a hold of her. Again, good Luke, minimum Luke, good Luke, and, kind of gets a hold of her and, she's really upset. And I was like, okay, good. Now, child, we get to Serena. Girl, Serena isn't getting ready because I guess Mr. Wheeler done said yes, right? So she's like packing her bag. She's getting, she's getting the baby, whatever. And then the way, so I was just like, ooh, girl, you's in trouble. Because everybody knows this. Because again, Serena didn't tolerate this shit when she was a wife and June was doing it, right? So think about all the times June would go behind Serena's back and talk to Fred and get little presents and get little good tidings and how pissy Serena looked. Child, karma comes back at you fast and quick, because Miss Wheeler came down those steps and slapped the dog fuck out of her. Slapped the whole ass taste out her mouth. And I was like, ooh, girl. Even me and the Martha was like, ooh, okay. So then she doesn't slap her once, right? She slaps her twice. And I was like, ooh, girl. Like, the first slap is a how dare you slap. The second slap is I'm not a motherfucker to be played with slap, right? So then I was like, okay, girl, it's just the center. What the big deal is? Then she was like, bitch, I still stay away from my husband. Talk about you sneaking downstairs in the middle of the night. Who do you think you are? And I was like, oh, Serena, you gotta, like, again, I'm not in the side hoeing and all that type of stuff, but I do know if you're going to do it right, right? And that little thing you did with Mr. Wheeler, that was sloppy, messy. Like, you should have gave him enough inclination for him not to repeat that conversation. He just should have told his wife what it was and should have been like, boop, bop, the boo. But she, like, again, her pussy game was like this, very, very low. So I was like, ooh, girl, Serena. And she was like, stay away from her husband. And then it was like, who do you think you are? And then Serena was like, Mrs. Frederick Waterford. I was like, girl, you should put some more bass in your titties for that. Like, you've been Mrs. Frederick, Frederick Waterford for whatever. So then she was like, I think you're a whore. Not a hoe, a whore. A whore. I was like, ooh, girl. I mean, which is all great because one, Serena is getting everything, not everything, but she's getting a good taste of what she deserves. And two, when Serena does get the Wheelers back, because she will, it's going to make it all the better, okay? Because I was like, ooh, girl. I was like, Mrs. Wheeler. I mean, I don't know if I'll be okay with the handmaid talking to my husband type of shit, but I would have, I guess you can't chop up another finger because she needs it for the baby. I don't know. But I was just like, ooh, Lord have mercy. I was like, but this is great. I was like, Serena's getting what she deserves. Check. I was like, the Wheelers are building up their karmic debt because I really think Serena's just going to burn the motherfucking house down, quite frankly. I mean, that's what I would do in that situation. I mean, I would just be like, one night, just would have locked all the doors and just burn them all up. Not for any future case where that fire happens and I'm nearby and present. I do not condone arson. But I'm saying in a creative, fictional way, that's how I would have gotten it. That's how I think Serena's revenge should be. Anyway, June goes to see Tuello, okay? So she's salty. Tuello's down in the dumps. And then June's like, okay, we're going to fight. Or whatever. Fuck them, whatever. And my thought is, okay, June, why don't you join the CIA? Because clearly Tuello needs some help, right? The world's shittiest spy needs all the help he can get. You ain't got shit to do. Your therapy ain't working, right? You have all this pent-up aggression and shitty-ass ideas. Join one of those intelligence apparatuses and they can show you how to formulate a good plan. It's not that Tuello has bad plans. He has bad execution, right? So clearly between those two monkeys, they can kind of get together a good motherfucking plan, okay? So, which is just my thing. I was like, why hasn't June joined the CIA? So then June is like, I'm done with Lawrence. Fuck him. And then Tuello's like, well, what about Nick? And she's like, well, what about Nick? I was like, girl, does everybody know your pussy's so wet for Nick? Like, how is your business all in the streets like that everybody knows that, like, Nick is the one that just makes you just slip and slide? Like, ooh, girl, you need to button that up because once fucking Luke gets a hold of that, he's going to have a whole ass problem. So anyway, Tuello tells June that he offered Nick to be an asset for the CIA and offered him immunity in Canada, to which June did not know. Why would you know that? And then Tuello says something which, again, goes back to what I said. He's like, why don't you step up? Between, Angel's flight and you testifying against Fred, you have power. Why don't you use it? And June's like, I don't feel comfortable right now. Now, okay, if you do not feel comfortable using your high social status and political capital to help the United States, why are you not doing it to get your daughter? What are you saving it up for? Fucking Christmas? Like, this is what you use political capital and high social standing for, things you motherfucking need and want. So again, they're just going to flesh that out because I'm going to harp on this right to the end of the fucking season because it just does not making sense to me why this not was an avenue. Unless you could tell me that Gilead took out every TV station, took out all the news places, but we know that's not the case because we saw in, season 2 when June was on a television show with the Waterfords, right? So somebody's fucking watching television in the world, okay? Because they were on a fucking television show like in season 2. So I'm just like, okay, whatever. So Tuello goes, why don't he goes, well, I can set up a meeting with Nick because Tuello wants, June to kind of talk Nick into being an asset, which again, the way Tuello's track record is, I don't think that's a good idea. Like, you just don't have a really good track record. Like, you're not even you're like 00 -2. Like, I just don't I just wouldn't put my life and safety in Tuello's hands. So I see why Nick is kind of like, okay. But June was like, set up the meeting. And I was like, girl, she's about to fuck this up. I was like, girl, okay. Now, Serena's back at the center, basking in her glory, child, right? Not until, in her little off yellow, talking to people, doing the whole Gilead speech. Woo, 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 they taking pictures. Oh, praise be. Oh, whatever. People in Toronto, you should just get you a Gilead too. Serena skinning and grinning. Child, here comes the Wheelers. And I was like, ha ha. So Mrs. Wheeler's like, you look tired. You should go home. She was like, no, I'm fine. I'm good. She's like, oh no, you could go home and then we could just take baby Noah. I was like, girl, this bitch is so out of pocket. Like, she's just out of pocket just for no reason, just because. And I'm like, you're not even in Gilead, right? Like, you're in Toronto, right? Like I can see up this, like, this just shows you how people would just really get slick in the mouth with you when they think they have 2 inches above you. And Serena was like, okay, I do feel tired. Why don't I go ahead and feed him, okay? And she's like, oh no, that's okay. You can just use the bottle. Serena's like, I didn't bring a bottle. And Mrs. Wheeler's like, I told you to bring a bottle. And the husband is just sitting here like a dope because he must know his fucking wife is fucking mean as a rattlesnake too. So he's just skinning and grinning, like pretend like he don't hear this whole motherfucking conversation. And I was just like, child. And Serena's like, well, I remember to bring one. Let me go do it now. And then Mrs. Wheeler's like, yeah, and we'll bring Noah tomorrow so you can stay home and get some rest. I was like, oh no. So the Martha, the black maid Martha, who was there when they were going there, covers for Serena during the conversation and is like, oh, that's okay. I should have thought to put in the bottle or whatever. So I was like, interesting. So then Serena was like, okay, and this better not be some magical Negro Martha who comes around and makes all Serena's problems and things go away. But I think it may be an allegiance or whatever, right? But clearly we don't know how that's going to turn out because something happens in a couple of seconds. So Serena goes in the back and then like she's like going to breastfeed and you could tell, the actress does, Yvonne, I forgot her last name, does a really good job of conveying the fact that she's thinking about running, right? So she's looking behind her. And then there's this fantastic shot. There's always like one shot in A Handmaid's Tale that just kind of encapsulates really the essence of the episode. And it's Serena gets into the back to the dressing room and she's like framed by the exit, right? And I was like, wow, that was just a great, beautiful shot. And I'm thinking, oh, girl, what are you going to do? Are you really going to run? Like, where are you about to go? And whatever. I was like, Serena is clearly not made for this quasi-handmaid life. Like, look, let's be clear. She ain't had to do no handmaidly shit, right? She ain't had to deal with literally a tenth of what Junior's had to do. Serena's just getting like handmade light, okay? And she's like breaking down, okay? So I was like, oh my God, Serena, what you gonna do? You can't run, they're gonna find you. You done already shot Ezra, to which Mr. Wheeler threw in your face when you saw him the last time. And I was like, ooh, girl. I was like, so anyway, she gets there and I was like, okay, June, just, I was like, okay, Serena, go ahead and breastfeed. Child, Serena runs out the back of the door with the baby. And then she like runs in the middle of traffic, trying to get folks to stop. And then finally this nice blue-haired Canadian woman puts her in the back of her car and Serena starts running. And I was like, girl, here's a phrase I didn't think I'd say. You need to call Tuello, right? Because if Tuello needs a win, right, then the perfect win if he can't get Nick is to get Serena, right? And Serena should be now at the point to realize that as long as she's connected with Gilead, she will never be safe. So I hope this season finale, hope next episode, I didn't see the trailers, is Serena having a conversation with Nick, and in order to make up for the public stunt that she pulled earlier in the season with June's baby, she does another public stunt and decides that she's going to denounce Gilead to all their business, and then that's how things are going to end. That's what I'm naming. Again, I don't think we'll ever make up for all the bad shit that Serena did, but I was like, girl, those are your options, because as long as you're on the lane with that baby, the Wheelers are going to find you, right? So I was like, that's if the blue-haired chick don't drag you right up to the Wheelers and dump you out. So I was like, ooh, girl. I was like, I don't know. So June arrives at the meeting with Nick. He's sitting on the steps. And he's like, you should have took the deal. And she's like, you should have took your deal. And it's definitely giving me this whole like baby daddy, baby mama conversation tease. Like, I got Luke and Nicole. I got Rose. And then June starts going in and like, well, what are you going to do when Rose gets a handmaid? Are you going to hold them down and rape them too? And he's like, Rose is pregnant. Like, I don't understand why you guys like stand for Nick as much as you do. Like, he's okay, but I never really understood why everyone was just so like Nick. I mean, he's just a come up kid. Like, look, he done went from an eye to a driver to an eye to a commander. Like, he's just been on the come up, like literally. Like, yeah, he's done right by June, but that's the mother's child. He got feelings, but folks be going crazy about Nick, and I was like, he's okay. So then it's like, Nick's like, Gilead is changing, we're doing things, and then June's like, and it's like, yes, and June's like, I don't want to cause any problems for you, and he's like, that's okay, you probably can't see me again, but I was like, but you said earlier in the season that you were going to see June again, like, so literally y'all just dangled each other in front of each other's faces, and y'all just go running, like, literally, I guess that's what it is. So then Nick, of course, does the I love you, and June's like, I love you too. And I was like, ugh, okay, I guess. And I was just like, tell Nicole I love her, and I'm thinking about her all the time. And I was like, whatever. Whatever. But, I mean, I do understand Nick's position, right? Like, Nick's situation is very understandable, very relatable, and very pragmatic. Because he can't really betray Gilead. His wife's father is really high up, right? Gilead is her home, which I was like, well, let's go back. How could Gilead be her home? Because Gilead has not been in existence that long, right? So let's be clear. Everybody who's involved in Gilead is new to Gilead in their construction and their formation. Rose was not born in Gilead. Gilead's only her home because her father told her it was her home, because clearly she used to live in the United States of America when it's freely formed and continuous. So I was just like, it's like any other place. But also, Nick ain't trying to move to Toronto or and be with Luke and June and I'll play baby daddy, whatever, right? So I was like, fine. So we get back to Commander Lawrence's house, and Rose is being all fawned over by the other wives, and here comes Aunt Lydia and Naomi, and one of the wives were like, oh, so aunts are being invited now? I was like, damn, these bitches are rude as fuck. I was just like, and Aunt Lydia was like, but again, I'm in for it because Aunt Lydia deserves to be under a jail at this point. So any time that she can fucking get the business given to her, I'm all here for it. So anyway, the commanders are all meeting, and they're gloating about taking down the planes, and now people are going to know that Gilead defends its borders, and they're celebrating the fact that Russia, China, and North Korea, of course, congratulated them. And then Nick says they're sending 2 battalions to the border, and kind of answers the thing that that Canada gave the United States permission to use their airspace to go through Gilead, right? So now it puts the Canadian government in a difficult situation because now, lives are lost and this whole operation went down. And then, of course, they bring up the fact that we need to fix this June Osborne problem. And there's like this really big pregnant pause. And then Commander Lawrence is like, fine, we'll get to it. And I thought, sure, he's going to be like, yeah, sign her up, do whatever. But I think he still likes June. It's just June or whatever, and he's not really willing to go like full like revenge mode, right now. So anyway, the Commander Mackenzie toasts to Commander Lawrence and all his accomplishments, and then Commander Lawrence steps back, standing next to Naomi. And it's like, I do like to defy expectations, and is putting his hand on her shoulder, and Naomi's looking really uncomfortable. And I was like, girl, what do you feel uncomfortable about? Like, you don't even have any options, right? Like, you were scared they're going to send you to the colonies, right? So what do you think you're going to do? Like, there's no speed dating in Gilead. There's no Tinder in Gilead. There's no Hinged in Gilead. And at least, if you fuck around with Commander Lawrence, he ain't gonna try to hunch on you. He gonna fucking have you nice meals. And, your baby will be fine. Like, I'm wondering what this delay is. Like, the fact that he killed your husband, be bitter in your bedroom, in your separate bedroom in his house, versus trying to before, you being a handmaid. Because I was scared that they're going to make her a handmaid, right? That when that scene set up, I was like, child, they're about to make her a handmaid. So the fact is that you went in the Red Center, you should be literally like, every time Commander Lawrence shows up, right? Because your options are limited, if not non-existent at this point. But girl, whatever. Now, so then we get to like the final scene, and there's a vigil for the fallen soldiers of whatever. I didn't even tell you what the operation was, but of the fallen, we'll call it Operation #Free Hannah, right? So we'll call it that Operation #Free Hannah. And we're saying the soldiers' names. And they're going through, and Tuella's leading it, and there's a flag, and everyone's holding candles. And child, in the back are all the Canadians talking about, go home, fuck America, America sucks. And I was like, wow, Canada, like, is that all it took? Like, literally the demise of the United States for you to be like, Canada is large. Like, I looked it up. There is a 20,000 square foot difference between the United States, which is larger in square footage than Canada, right? There is enough space for American refugees to go to different parts of Canada. Like, you ain't gotta go to Newfoundland, or I'm not trying to send you up close to like Greenland, but there's enough space for the Americans to move into Canada and integrate themselves into Canadian society and be like worthy immigrants, right? Like I understand what they're doing with the whole immigration thing, but the difference is that unlike, these are mostly skilled Americans who are coming in as immigrants, right? So this is like a little different than you talk about unskilled labor. Like, no one's coming up to Gilead with their PhDs. Like, if Emily was still there, right? Like, Emily didn't have to work at a grocery store. She had a whole ass job. She was working at a counseling center, right? So these aren't like people who are taking jobs away from Canadians. They're actually adding to the economy if you just get, if you integrate them into the society. So I really did, but anyway, I was just surprised Canadians were that salty. I mean, the salty waffles were just in full effect. They're protesting. So then they call Emma, which is the daughter of the commander who led Operation #Free Hannah, right? Calls her up to the front, and she starts to do the Pledge of Allegiance. And she starts to fumble, and I'm like, does she not know the words? Or is she scared? Or is she just disenchanted? Couldn't really figure that out. But so she stumbles, and so June comes up, was like, can I help her? And then she walks up and starts to do the Pledge of Allegiance with Hannah. I keep calling her Hannah, but that's the whole point, right? With Emma, parentheses, Hannah, does to do the Pledge of Allegiance with Emma, right? And then the whole crowd joins in. They start doing the Pledge of Allegiance, and then shots starting firing out all of a sudden. And then look how they shoot the flag up. People start screaming, and then you do the slow motion, and June falls on Emma, parentheses, Hannah, and the episode ends, right? So wow. So this was such a great episode. It had the perfect mix of drama and messiness and increased stakes. I couldn't think the stakes get any higher. And really like a lot of tiebacks to a lot of things, right? And we didn't get a whole bunch of side stories for people we couldn't stand. Like Janine and Esther, that shit's gonna work itself out. I'm sure we'll get that tomorrow, next week. Janine and Esther, but we got this Naomi Lawrence like shotgun wedding going on. And child, I don't know what Serena's gonna do. Hopefully, Serena's a little better at formulating a plan. The problem is she just thinks a little bit too highly of herself in her plan making process, because she, like I will say that she could have stepped up and came up with a better pussy game for Misty Wheeler than what she did, but she was desperate and whatever. So we'll definitely see. So drop down in the comments. Let me know what you think. Like this video, subscribe if you're not a subscriber, share with your friends, and I will see you next week on time for Handmaid's Tale. And if you didn't notice, I'm also doing White Lotus on HBO. We're going to be episode 2 on Sunday. And this weekend, I'm going to start Interview with a Vampire, right? I know we're like 6 or 7 episodes in, but if you're not watching it on AMC, it's a great way to start. I'm going to do that this weekend, try to get a couple of reviews up for that, and just see how it goes. Anyway, thanks, guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye.